Good afternoon, everybody, and it's our final webinar of 2021. Can you believe we've been doing these almost every single week this year? We had a little bit of break during August, but we are on our final webinar of 2021. So we thought we'd look back at some of the things that Forces have shared with us over the last year to perhaps highlight, because we know, and we do track, that not everybody sees every webinar. So it is always an opportunity to replay some of the ones and highlight some of the things. I'm joined by Mike today, who's many of you know from the team. He sits in the background quite often in the webinars, but is absolutely a key part of the team, how we deliver these webinars, and we do a lot of planning to make sure these work. And I've got Tom Connor from the tech team with us as well, who's going to come in and talk Federation a little later on in the webinar, and perhaps tease one of the webinars we're going to be doing in January as we get started again. Please pop your questions into the chat as we normally do. We do want them to be as interactive as possible. We know it's important to you that we answer your questions, and that's been one of the things the NEP has perhaps excelled at as a programme over the last year. The NEP has enabled great change in the way we work, and perhaps the foundation of Microsoft 365 approach is to actually get the benefit out of the significant changes, the way we work with files. And we're going to look at one of the webinars we did only a few months ago about file sharing, and to pull an extract up of that and then have a little chat around that in a second. But once you get to 365, beyond Teams, we really see the days of emailing documents internally is gone, and the benefits that can bring are absolutely huge. But we also need to be able to manage files in a more effective way, make sure we're sharing them really well. So I'm going to replay a short clip from a couple of months ago where Mike and I were talking about file sharing, and recover how we share files using the 365 environment to get some real benefit, yet still manage access to those files that we really need to manage. So let's replay the clip, and then we'll talk through some of the key points and updates since then.
So I suppose when we're looking at sharing content and information, it's really thinking about who we want to have access. We want to ensure that their security is there, and we are managing those permissions. So ultimately, if we've created something, we know who we're going to be asking. So I think that you put up on the right-hand side there the whole manage access folder or bar, where we can then start to decide who it is that should need access to it.
And you can see we've got different levels of access. So the owners of the team have got all the owner rights that you'd expect, and that could be just a handful of people. But then you've got visitors who, on this occasion, if they've got access to visit folders in this team, they can only view them. And that's fine within the organisation. We only want them to view them. But members of the team can edit them. And we can manage that here for the whole, for either a document or a folder. So if I go back up into here, I can manage access at folder level. So every document within that folder then inherits the rights of that folder, or I can go straight into a specific document. And if I go into this slides for webinar masters, I can say, right, okay, then I want to manage access to that so nobody else can view that who's not a member of the team. Click that button, that's it now, it's gone. Only members of this team have got access to that folder. And again, you can be very specific on that and make it individual. So if I wanted to give a link to give access to that folder, I can bring in a member of the team. So Reeson, for instance, in the team, I'd send him a message and say, demo of access management. So he knows I'm not trying to do anything complicated for him. Sends that link, he's sent an email, and now he's got access to this particular file in this team, just that occasion, just that folder. He can't get into the wider folder, he can only get into that file.
That's a very brief extract of a video that we did the other day about managing access and sharing access to files and folders. And this is one of the perhaps things that people get concerned around. How is it important is that we adopt this sort of approach, and what sort of benefits can we get out of this?
Thanks, Dave, and I totally agree with you. This is one of the key areas where policing can benefit from really changing the way they work. But there is that lack of certainty, I think, in certain instances around the security to ensure that people are seeing the right things at the right time, and perhaps more importantly, it's not going to areas that we don't want them to go to. I think once forces get to understand exactly what they can do with SharePoint and also how they can share those files in a safe and secure way, it unlocks a huge wealth of opportunities around collaboration, improves the speed and efficiency where people can sort of share documents, work on documents. It ensures that people are working on the latest version rather than a dated one. There's so many different benefits that are available to this. And I think it's once forces become and people within forces become more confident in how they can use it, then they will start to really reap the benefits. And I think that the previous webinars that we've done and then the information we have on things like the Enabling Centre really hopefully will point people in the right direction to get that confidence.
And I think, Mike, one of the things that we saw in the protective marking webinar very recently was around how this SharePoint, it can be intelligent enough to pick up on protective marking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, again, working with Duffy Powers on that one. I think listening to what they were saying and the benefits that they're beginning to experience as a result of that, it leads to that peace of mind. As long as you are doing the correct due diligence, you have that confidence that the tools and the mechanisms available within the products help you to manage where it goes and perhaps more importantly, who it goes to. So, but it's all about getting that better understanding. I think this is where the webinars hopefully have really helped that.
And doing the webinars have helped us to learn the skills as well and use them in our daily lives. So the version control is a really powerful one. We've recently had the Chaucer Roadshows, hence there wasn't a webinar last week. And we ended up with hundreds of versions, but there was only ever one document, one link, and we were all sharing on that. And the people who we were working with got view rights, whilst the team who were editing had the edit rights, and we were able to roll back and extract bits out as we kept moving it forward. One of the other use cases that had a lot of interest and has a lot of benefits has been around how the 365 functionality can be used to stream on the platform, to get to Teams, to enable our frontline officers with a mobile phone to access live streaming, and particularly from drones. So going back to May this year, we had Andy from Thames Valley Police and Hampshire Police's joint operations team, who shared how they'd used their existing Microsoft 365 implementation with Teams and their drone technology, and with a relatively, and let's be honest, a very cheap piece of technology, were able to exploit the two systems in a way that really did bring some benefits. So I'm going to replay Andy just going through some of the use cases that we saw when drones were used as part of the 365 environment. So let's replay that and refresh our memory of what we covered then.
So here we have some use case examples, and I'll start with the top right box. These are examples of incidents where we've actually deployed the drone and we've demonstrated the live streaming capability to good effect. The top right box is an urban search and rescue exercise, multi-agency, police, fire, ambulance, local authority, and it's a relicensing exercise for urban search and rescue, where they put a load of building rubble and actors and pretend casualties. And you can see there the drone is a cage around it, and it's flying in and amongst all of the debris, and we are live streaming what the drone can see to urban search and rescue team leaders, to fire command vehicles. This particular incident generated a lot of interest, and we had fire officers coming up to us and saying, could you just stream that to my boss, who's sat in at a desk in Birmingham at the moment, just to demonstrate the capability of this. The second one at the bottom right, a protest removal operation. Again, being able to live stream the drone that's at the same head height of the police officers that are going in to detain those protesters. And the drone is capturing really good evidence. And then the final one to the left, then this is a particular good example, an individual that suffering from a mental breakdown, had taken himself up to a navigation marker at 9 o'clock in the morning, and multi-agency response for the safety of that individual.
So Mike, that wasn't our only webinar on drones. So what's happened since this webinar?
Well, I think this was, I think, a prime example of how these webinars are set up to work, which is about sharing best practice so others can work from it. As a result of that webinar, which was fascinating to see how you could take 365 really into the operation environment, Nottinghamshire saw the webinar. They looked at how they were using drones and they incorporated 365 into their use of drones, which we had showcased at one of these events a few months ago. And then the beauty of that anecdotally is we found out that another couple of forces who were at the webinar at the time watching the NOTS demonstration got in contact with us to say they are also taking this idea forward within their force. And that's the beauty behind what we're trying to do with these webinars. It gives people an opportunity to see how forces are using 365. It's almost that business case, and then they can don't have to start with a blank sheet of paper. They can take it as part of their evidence, as part of their business case, and start pushing the boundaries within their own force. So it's really has been a fantastic success story started by TVP.
And only this week I received an email through the NEP info box asking for some help if somebody just watched the webinar on the replays, and their force now is looking to implement the same approach. And the beauty, of course, is we're all on the same technical environment, so we can actually implement the same technical solutions to this. So they picked up on the webinar and are going to move forward themselves with this, using the same approach and saving tens of thousands of pounds compared to having bespoke technology. But perhaps more importantly, the technology is more available because every officer in the force has already got a mobile version of Teams. Therefore, anybody who the control room are deploying to an incident is deployable with a live streaming capability. And they're also looking at what other capabilities they can do in terms of live streaming, in terms of other CCTV feeds or camera feeds or audio feeds, to be able to get that to the people who need it most on the ground when they're doing the work. So really great to hear that. And our big plea is, if you've got something to showcase, get in touch with us so we can pick that up, showcase that, and allow other forces to benefit. And of course, we have the solutions catalogue in place on the Enabling Centre, where you can download solutions that are there. And just perhaps a timely reminder, there is a solution in there called 4Es that Kentonetics shared, which is about COVID response in terms of the different ways of monitoring the engagement activity as well as the enforcement activity that went on during the COVID process. I'm going to bring something perhaps that we haven't explored now on SharePoint webinar, on our webinars yet, and something we're planning on in the new year, that actually, again, maximizes the benefit of the fact that we're all working on the same technology. I'm bringing Tom in here. So, Tom, one of the things that we want to start talking about is federation of teams. But I think what we need to do is perhaps define what that is and what the problem it solves is, first of all.
Yeah, good afternoon. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think federation is a great capability that is available to forces, but I think there's fair to say some little understanding around what it can achieve and what it can't do, more importantly, to ensure that from a force risk perspective and understanding perspective, this is something that can be adopted effectively. So in essence, federation is the ability of being able to send a message or see the presence of somebody in another organization. So differently to guest access, where you are inviting that individual into your tenant and they have the ability to access content that you have provided them, documents, SharePoint sites, Teams, etc., when they want. Federation is very different. Federation is purely the ability of being able to send a chat message, have a call, or see the presence of another individual. So think of it as an extension of your phone system. At the moment, your phone system has the ability to only dial people internally, so you dial your 4-digit extension. What Teams Federation allows you to do is similar to having a prefix in front of that, which will dial another force, allowing you to then type in the extension of that individual in another force and make a point-to-point phone call. And the way Teams does that is by creating a relationship with the domains that are being used between the two organizations. So we've got federation in place with a number of forces. So they would add pds.police.uk to their tenant. We would add for example, cams.police.uk to ours, and that would then allow us to send a message to anybody in cams just by knowing their email address. And there's a couple of benefits to this. Where you're a guest of a tenant and you would still have the ability to send a chat message, the difficulty with that is that chat message sits within the tenant that it was sent from. So if you're a guest of half a dozen tenants, you've got to go into each of those tenants to see that if there are any messages there waiting for you, you will get a notification, but you won't be able to reply to that message. With Federation, it comes directly into your home tenant. So where you're working on your day-to-day basis, you will see messages appearing alongside messages from people within your force. So what we're really sort of trying to drive here is all forces have taken the NEP blueprints. All forces have a similar position in terms of their assurance of this platform. So by getting forces to add the domains of the other forces into their environment will create a mesh across all of UK policing, allowing anybody to send a message, be able to, you can also do screen sharing as part of almost a one-to-one meeting. So again, we've heard some forces maybe a little bit of nervousness around that, but ultimately it's no different to creating a meeting with somebody and sharing your screen through a meeting. So the capabilities are there, it's just doing it in a more efficient way. And I think the point is it's a less structured point in time. Hold on, I need to speak to Brian. I may pick up the phone, I may send an email, but sending a chat, I think, as we all know, once we started to use Teams, is really beneficial. So I'll put into the chat of this meeting, I'll do it now as we speak. There's a link there to a document that is hosted within the Force Collaboration team that provides some really simple instructions as to what you'd need to do, your technical team would need to do to add all of the other forces. There is also a list of all of the domains that are used across policing. I think the big ask is, speak to your teams, look at the opportunities. We're more than happy to provide any support of questions, etc. But I think there's a huge benefit if we can get this implemented across policing.
And Tom, this is already technically assured, isn't it, for security?
Correct.
Because it doesn't actually change our security profiles much, because we all have IAM, we all have NMC, yeah. We all have the same approach. Exactly.
And also, I mean, you're absolutely right. So anybody from an NEP point of view, we would say that, this is a capability that should be turned on. But there is also the opportunity of doing this outside of policing. Again, that may require a local risk assessment, but you could partner with your local council, you could partner with your NHS trust and set that federation up, again, allowing you to do those point-to-point messages. So, that there's I think a stage to this within policing where we have that confidence around the audience and those that we are going to be federated with. But once that is done, hopefully the opportunities and the benefits are going to be seen by everybody, and then you can look to extend that outside of the police community.
And we did a webinar which demonstrated the value of guest access for our partners at local levels. Imagine being able to amplify that, to be able to allow that local policing team to be able to speak to the housing officer when they need to speak to the housing officer, and to be able to exchange. So that's the sort of benefits we can potentially see as we come out of Federation. And certainly those forces who are trying it, most of us perhaps trying it on their alliance boundaries, but the more and more we open this up, the better it will be, because at the end of the day, crime doesn't recognise the boundaries. We've got to be smart enough to use the technology that's already available, proven and assured to allow us to work across boundary in a more effective way. Certainly where we've already got the Federation, it certainly helps me when I'm working at a national level. I can just see that a colleague I need to speak about to in another force, I can see that they've got a little green dot next to them, they're available, I can send them a chat and get that instant reply, rather than perhaps setting up workflows, processes, etc. to get those out of that. We've got one more little section to cover now, and I'm beginning to have a few technical issues because it must be the end of the year and perhaps my computer needs some time. I keep getting warnings that the audio isn't being shared, so I'm going to try very carefully now with this very last one and just reflect on a recording that Derbyshire Police actually did to help them roll out their 365 tasking approach, which is a phenomenal way of using the whole suite together to achieve some phenomenal outcomes in terms of operational delivery. So let's replay this very short video to refresh our minds on this one.
PCSO Kennedy has heard on the grapevine that there's a rave planned tonight at the Blue Lagoon near Buxton, and after a bit of digging she finds an event on Facebook that indicates about 200 people are planning to attend. She escalates it through the proper channels and it ends up as an agenda item on the tasking meeting later that day. In the meeting, which is held over Teams, the rave comes up for discussion. The chair tasks an officer to request assistance from the task force on road policing, to get the SNT to carry out high visibility patrols for reassurance, and the drone unit for aerial monitoring of the planned rave site. She also wants an intelligence officer to liaise with GMP, as there's a strong indication that the majority of the attendees are coming in from across the border. The tasking and coordination officer, who is facilitating the meeting, creates all of these tasks as they're being discussed and assigns them to the appropriate person. Once they're assigned, the recipient will get an email notification and a Teams alert explaining what they have to do and what the deadline is. So, those people head off, complete their tasks and report back. The TACO updates each task by a planner, and once that agenda item is complete, it's reviewed and debriefed before it moves into the completed basket. It will stay there indefinitely, so we can go back at any time to check what was done, by who and when. This process ensures we work according to the National Intelligence Model and the APP. An extra benefit of this process is that we can use previous events and incidents to give us a head start if something similar crops up in the future. So if there's another rave planned next summer, we can just search this basket, drag up the last agenda item and see what we can learn from it.
And I think, you know, the reason we've chosen that one just to bring it to a close is just to reflect on all the different elements. Even in this webinar today, we've spoken about drones, we've spoken about file management, we've spoken about federation. If the federation was then placed with the force, then they could just literally chat to the intelligence officer to intelligence officer across boundaries. The fact that the whole 365 suite is working together, sharing the information, is part of this. So Mike, what would you say to forces who are struggling in terms of rolling beyond Teams use?
I think the important thing to remember, Dave, and for those on watching this, is that the whole rollout of 365 isn't just a technical program. It is around about business change and adoption. And I suppose what I would suggest to the viewers is to start pushing the boundaries. Talk to your project teams, talk to us across NEP and PDS, and ask us to explain how you can use it differently. It is about changing and delivering benefits to the force through modern and effective working, and there's a wealth of opportunity. It's down to ensure that you guys start asking the questions, ask questions of us, ask questions of your local teams, and really start thinking about the best way to use this in 2022.
And I think the point is now that technology is no longer the barrier, it's the opportunity, it's the enabler. And Tom, if I can ask you, you know, you've been a key part of our delivery over the last 12 months, etc. What do you think is the biggest opportunity coming forward?
Yeah, I think that is a really open question, but I think there is a huge amount here specifically around just embedding some of these technologies that are there available. I think we've started to see some of these new services being used within areas of teams, but that is starting to grow sort of almost exponentially as those services and technologies are getting delivered wider to forces. So I think Power Apps is a key one that we are starting to see some real traction within forces. There was initially some nervousness around the product being completely new. Not only was it new in terms of a replacement service, it was completely new as a service. You know, we didn't have that sort of community type development platform prior to Office 365, and the automation through Power Automate, I think the opportunities there are going to be significant around how forces can streamline some of those day-to-day services and really release resources to to focus on more pressing matters than necessarily more administrative ones.
And Power Automate, even before you get to Power Apps, can be phenomenal. I use that on a daily basis to help me work just on the normal routine work. So thanks, Tom. And I know I didn't warn you that question was coming, but there you go. It shows how agile we are. as I mentioned, this is our last webinar of 2021, and certainly both Mike and I will really want to thank all of you who've joined us live or played back the recordings. With nearly 10,000 recording playbacks of these webinars in the last year. I keep looking at the data, and it'd be fantastic to do that. You can access them at any time on the NEP website as we continue to roll out and adopt and move things forward. Mike and I spend a great deal of time planning and delivering these sessions for you, and your feedback's been incredibly valuable. And we still want to hear from you about what you think. And I never miss an opportunity to promote the feedback survey. You can scan it on your phone, go to the bit.ly there, enter the form, give us your feedback, and also submit things that you'd like to see us cover as we start to plan the January, February and March inputs as we continue through the programme. And I'm particularly keen to thank all the colleagues in Forces who've helped to share their journeys and their findings. This is the most powerful thing about it. We're a national programme, a national service. We want to hear from Forces, and that's what you tell us is most valuable. So we do want to keep a big thank you to all those people who contributed to our webinars over the last year or so. As many of you know, the NEP closes as a programme formally in March, but importantly, that doesn't mean that we're just closing down and tier medals. Some of the key services that form the NEP are being transferred as we speak, or will be transferred into business as normal within the Police Digital Service. And in the new year, we will be reaching out to you to ask about your experience of the NEP, what went well, what didn't go as well. And it's not so that we can all feel good and slap ourselves on the back. It's so we can actually inform other work that's continuing or new work to make sure that we learn the lessons from the NEP, that what worked for you, how can we help you move forward better, and how can programmes continue to do that. Some assurance from myself and Mike that webinars will continue in the new year. We're already planning the first ones, and we'll go back to Federation to get into some more of the detail around that. But again, keep your eyes peeled on the internet, on the Enabling Centre and our social media accounts. And we look forward to inviting more Forces to share their experience and innovation so we can help drive other elements forward. And we're going to start featuring more elements of the Police Digital Service and the other programmes which are reaching delivery so that Forces can benefit, because we do believe that this has been a good way of sharing that knowledge. The NEP team itself will be taking a break from the 22nd of December through to the 4th of January. So it leaves the end of the session for me to wish you a Merry Christmas and a peaceful and safe New Year. And we hope to see you back again very soon. And remember, if you get bored on a Wednesday at 12 whilst you're during the Christmas period, just hit the website and replay one of the videos, and I hope you enjoy that. But thank you all for joining us over the last year, and we look forward to seeing you in 2022. Thanks everybody.